Excellent. We are live. Welcome, everyone, to the Blacks in Technology, the Tech Life, Getting Hired, Engineering at GitHub. I'm your host, Greg Greenlee, and tonight we have our guests. We have Jasmine Greenaway and we have Stanley Goldman. Both are developers at GitHub. Jasmine is a developer at GitHub where she works on GitHub for Visual Studio Extension. She's an adjunct lecturer at LaGuardia Community College, teaching front and back end web development. She also volunteers her time outside of work as a co-organizer of Brooklyn JS, a monthly local meetup held in the Cobble Hill area of Brooklyn, New York. Stanley is also a developer at GitHub, and he's working on GitHub for Unity. He's a self-taught engineer working in the field for over 15 years. He's also an OSS contributor and maintainer, so that's open source software. He is constantly learning and currently looking for new ways to make an impact to the community. So we want to welcome both to the show.
All right.
Yeah. So, a little bit about the show. The Tech Life is a series that we started a while ago in order to have practical discussions about getting hired at some of the top tech companies in the world. And we just wanted to add to the conversation that's going on in technology and let people who are working, Black men and women who are working at some of these top tech companies, give their perspective as far as getting hired, you know, what it takes, and provide those resources back to the community. So that's what getting hired is all about. And let's get on with the Q&A. So I'll start with you, Jasmine. Tell us what is GitHub? We'll get into everyone's background here in a second, but tell us for those that don't know or who've never used GitHub before, tell us a little bit about what GitHub is.
So GitHub is basically at its core a hosting service for the source control Git, and Git is it's one of many forms of source control. And the thing about GitHub is that the great thing about GitHub is that when you host your repository on GitHub, you can use a bunch of other features other than just having your code there. You can use it to have discussions. So, and the main ways to do that are through like issues and pull requests. Have a discussion about the code and have a discussion about the project in general. It's all about collaboration and working together and making your workflow easier.
Excellent, excellent. So for those that don't know about version control, can you explain just a little bit about what version control is?
Sure. So version control basically is a way for you to, whether or not it's just code or documents, a way for you to see the changes of your document over time. Whether it's like HTML file, or even just like maybe a markdown file, or even just a simple like even to its simplest form, a text file. Just seeing the progression of the changes of the file over time. And the nice thing about GitHub is that with seeing those changes over time, you can actually see differences between last time you changed something to its current version. So yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So tell us about your job. Tell us, give us a description about, your average work day and some of your key responsibilities. We'll go with you again, Jasmine, and then we'll switch over to Stanley.
Okay, so my normal work day?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, sure. So my normal work day, I usually start off with answering some emails. So GitHub, there's a bunch of ways for you to get notifications on pull requests and issues. By the way, GitHub uses GitHub. So all of our code and stuff that we use, all of our code is all lives on GitHub, and any other things like roadmaps and stuff is also on GitHub. So whenever we want to have a new discussion, we'll make an issue and we'll have a discussion around that. And so I get notification emails about those discussions that I'm interested in. And so, I'll go through those, answer those, and then I'll get into some code. And normally it depends on what, we're doing that day. Maybe we're working on a feature. So I will probably start working on that feature or branch that I finished yesterday, that I was working on the previous day. The way I usually like to work is kind of put a pin in the last thing I've done. so that I can come back to it the next morning and kind of like jog my memory. And then every once in a while I have a meeting. So every Monday we have our team, and it just differs from team to team, but every Monday our team, we have a meeting and just chat about the things we did the prior week and the things we're going to do the next week or in the coming week. So, but normally it's emails, code, and eventually finding like a stopping point and then do it all over again.
Excellent. What about you, Stanley?
Well, it's kind of going to sound like the same thing, right?
Okay.
Oh, I guess it's a little bit different. I'm working with only one other person on the project that I'm working on GitHub for Unity, and she's located in Denmark. So that means at about 8 o'clock Eastern time, it's already about noon or 1 o'clock for her, if I'm right. So our time to actually collaborate together is limited. So usually what I end up doing is I'm on Slack, usually from about the time I wake up, and really kind of interacting with her, because that's where most of our work is, just us together on this project. So I'll do that until about noon. At about noon, she starts fading, at least noon my time. And so yeah, so then the day is usually me to myself at that point, which is more of the same, just coding and trying to move the project forward. Our project is a new one. It's in alpha, and it's yet to go beta. So there's a good chunk of unfinished work that we're still pushing through. So it's pretty busy right now.
Gotcha. Excellent. I know we kind of jumped right into your day-to-day work activities, but let's take a step back. How did you all get started in the field? How'd you get interested in technology? And then, tell us a little bit about your educational background as well. So we'll go with you again, Stanley, and then we'll switch over to Jasmine.
Sure. I guess it depends on how far back you want to go, right?
The beginning.
So the first thing that I can think of is for no reason whatsoever, as a kindergartner, I asked my father to get me a computer. Why I wanted one, I have no idea. He has no idea. He literally has no idea what exposed me to it. He just saved up his bonus one day and got me a Commodore 64. And I started to learn how to program on that. And then after that, it kind of zips forward to, I guess, high school, making friends that knew more and were interested in the same things that I was. Mm-hmm. And then it was college, and then actual work experience. So yeah, I kind of think I always wanted to do this, although I didn't always know what it was. Right. I think I kind of knew a little bit more about that as I got older. And yeah, I think I kind of just got really lucky, and my parents played along.
Excellent. It's funny. I have a similar background, although not totally in development, but it follows that same thing. And it's weird. I remember speaking with a friend of mine who actually asked me, did I know I wanted to do this? And I was just like, yes. Early on, my dad did the same thing. He got me a Commodore 16, not a 64. This was, we weren't that rich, but no, not that you had to be rich, but he probably didn't know what the 64 was. And then, computers back then were really, really new in the household. And so, I had a Commodore 16 at the time. And from that point on, I knew somehow, some way I would get into computers. I just didn't know exactly when and how. And it eventually came back around. So very, very interesting story. What about you, Jasmine?
For me, I think my first computer, it definitely was not any Commodore. It was like a compact Pizarro desktop computer with Windows 95 on it. And yeah, when we first got it, we didn't have internet on it. We didn't get it until like about a year later. But after that, but I guess prior to that, actually, I used to use this software suite called Coral. I think it's actually called the Coral Suite. And so Coral, I believe it was maybe a competitor to Microsoft's suite, right, in terms of documents, like their Word document and their presentation document. I forget the name, what Coral calls it, but I started off making like little silly presentations in Coral. I think it's called Coral Presentation, and I would make these little silly slides, and I'd show it off my mom, and she'd be like, "Haha, that's funny, that's cute," blah blah blah. And then when we got the internet, I wanted to put those slides on the internet. So I was trying to figure out like how to like get them on there, and that's what led me to this site called GeoCities. And GeoCities back in the day was just a place for you to like put together a little site and make all kinds of cool stuff. So I would put my slides on these sites, and eventually that turned into like just like I think I had like maybe 10 just GeoCities sites, like a few with these like Coral presentations and like ones of my favorite bands and like ones of like my favorite things to do. I think I had one like on like pickles because I love pickles. I just love, I don't know, it's silly, but I was like 12, 13. And then that turned into around that time also MySpace was really popular. So and with MySpace you could like kind of like change up your profile and like use a little CSS and HTML and make it look cool. And so I got really good at doing that, and I had a few friends who paid me to do the same thing to theirs. And then eventually that led me to LiveJournal, which blogging platform where you could do a little bit of modification there in terms of like your blog site. And then friends eventually paid me to do that for them too. So but at the end of the day, like I really didn't want to be a programmer. I wanted to be a meteorologist. I wanted to do research. I wanted to travel the world, and I wanted to like write reports on like just like I don't know, the weather. I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I wanted to be in like research. And so I went to school to be a meteorologist. I went to this aeronautical school in Daytona Beach called Embry-Riddle, and a lot of people there to go to be pilots. A lot of people there go to be engineers. And I minored in computer science because in meteorology and a lot of like research degrees, having like a little bit of like a computer background kind of gives you a competitive edge. So I liked my computer science classes better, so I switched. And and here I am today.
Very interesting journey. Started off with wanting to learn about the weather and got into computers. So interesting. So we'll stick with you, Jasmine, on this question. Tell us about some of your jobs and your experiences that kind of led you to be employed at GitHub.
Sure. So my first job was part of a referral from a friend in my last year of college in our senior project. So he told me, if you do this in VB.net, VisualBasic.net, I can probably hook you up with an internship. And I was like, you know what? I'm graduating soon. I would love to have an internship. And I wasn't having much luck lately or at that point. So I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll do it. And so that led me to my first job or my first internship where I was doing VB.net code in a web platform called ASP.NET. So I was doing HTML, CSS, JavaScript in the front end, and then in the back end I was doing VB.NET, and then also that led me to me doing some database stuff through SQL Server. And then from there, I got hired full time, and I went on to Sears where I kind of split my time between web and desktop applications. And then that led me to Rockstar Games, where I was, it was my second job, my second professional job, and I lived in Florida most of my life, and I was just like, I'm ready to leave. So I applied to 10 jobs, and I got I'll never forget, I sat in my coffee table for like 4 or 5 hours, applied to 10 jobs, wrote cover letters for all of them, and spruced up my resume, and I said, whoever calls me first, that's where I'll go. And it was Rockstar Games in New York. So I ended up there, and I was working on some internal tooling with ASP.NET and C# in the back end. I ended up getting my name in the GTA 5 credits for PC, PS4, and Xbox One, and that was really cool. And I really, that's like probably one of my biggest badges of honor, I guess. So I did that, and I ended up going to a conference in Portland. This conference called .NET Fringe. And this is 2015. So in 2014, Microsoft had announced that they were making .NET open source, and so they so people were like, it was like a really big thing, and someone made a conference about it, and so I went there and I met somebody who works at GitHub, and I didn't really think anything of it, but like we just got to chatting, and then a few months later I did this photo shoot for Women of Color in Tech. It was hosted by this group called Women of Color in Tech. And it kind of like came from like the Women of Color in Tech chat discussions that used to happen every Tuesday on Twitter. And so I signed up, and I got on, the photo shoot list, and our VP of Social Impact, Nicole Sanchez, started tweeting these pictures and putting captions on them. And the person who I met at the time noticed, you followed Nicole as well, and noticed, my picture. And he's like, "Hey, do you remember me? Would you like to work at GitHub? Have you thought about working here?" And I was like, "Yes." And I went through the interview process, and here I am today.
Excellent. And shout out to the women of color in tech. I can't remember who organizes that, but we've had conversations before.
Awesome. Yeah, it's run by Stephanie and Christina Murillo.
Right. So. Excellent. And what about you, Stanley? How'd you wind up at GitHub? What jobs and experiences have you had along the way? And in your bio, you say you're more self-taught. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Sure. Well, I guess so. Let's see. I started attending college in '99. My first job was actually the summer right before that. I was programming VB6. It was for, I can't remember their name. It was for a mortgage company, and I was programming some sort of internal business applications. And then, so that was the summer before. I started at Polytechnic in Farmingdale, New York. And I started there, and I met people, and someone got me an internship somewhere else, just a job, doing web design at another company in Hauppauge. And then after that, it just kind of, one thing led to another, and I was always kind of working. I was always more interested in what I was learning from whatever job I had than paying attention in class.
That happens.
It does. And then I was, albeit I was definitely, self-admittedly, I was distracted myself. So, and at some point, I just couldn't keep up the facade of trying to go to school while really actually wanting to just work. So at some point I just rolled the dice and took the chance and just started applying and just started working as opposed to trying to do both. So for a while, I guess it was kind of an Achilles heel of mine, or at least it was in my mind, that I didn't have a degree, and it would always kind of harp in my head or on my resumes. I think for a while I would still leave the resume ambiguous as if I was still attending and maybe just on a hiatus. And yeah, so many jobs later, many years later, at some point, let's see, I think maybe 6 years ago, Visual Studio 2012 had come out, and they changed a component that I used regularly. It was the TFS interface for Visual Studio. And I found a user voice board where people were complaining about it in droves. And I had an aha moment. I was like, all right, well, maybe I could make something good enough, and maybe eventually I could sell it, or maybe something. So I set on it, and for 9 months outside of my regular job, I was sitting there working on this side project, which was to just make an alternate source control client inside of Visual Studio. Eventually, I gave up and I just learned Git, and I stopped using TFS. But I put the work up there on GitHub. And maybe 3 years later, when I was itching to leave my current job at the time, a friend of mine happened to see a tweet by Scott Hanselman that was retweeting another person, my current team lead. And they were programming a Git client for Visual Studio. That was the actual project. So a friend of mine who had saw this tweet, saw this job, said, I think you should really apply for this, because he was a forced test user when I worked with him. So he kind of remembered and put the 2 and 2 together and sent me the link. And yeah, I applied and interviewed, and one thing led to another, and here I am.
I think what you said earlier is very interesting. As far as you were speaking about, you giving up college, and tell us a little bit about kind of how you got over that, not having a college degree on your resume. Like, what are some of the things, or did you do anything differently to make yourself more attractive in the job market?
Yeah, I think I did a few things. I did the certification thing. Like, I have a very early .NET MCSD certification, which helped. Those little small things that can at least remove some doubt of you knowing what you're talking about helped, at least at that point for me. And it took a long while to get over. I think at one point I eventually did listen to my mother and applied for NYIT and spent 2 semesters at NYIT. But then I had switched jobs, and things got harder, and the stakes got higher, and I left school again. So it did take a while for me to get comfortable and realize that it actually doesn't matter. I also think the market changed. I think the flood and demand of jobs in this field kind of superseded the old guarded thought that you need to have a degree in order to get by. I think that's definitely changed a lot from programming as opposed to the 10 years ago when I was trying to pull it off, or even 15 years ago, I guess, at this point. So I think that's also changed. I think the environment around not having a degree has changed. I think you do have to get over it and realize that there are some companies that are never going to call you, never ever going to look at you. And that you kind of have to understand that maybe you didn't really want to work there anyway. That's kind of a self-filtering process in a sense, but it takes a while for you to actually look at it that way.
Excellent. So Jasmine, tell us a little bit about the interview process for your developer's position at GitHub, and give us a little bit of insight on what that process was like. Was there initial phone screen? Did you have maybe 1 or 2 interviews, or was there a panel? Was there multiple rounds? Go into depth about that process.
Sure. Yeah. For me, there was multiple rounds. I guess total disclaimer, Stanley and I are on the same team, but we had different interviews. I was the second person to join the editor tools team on GitHub.
Okay.
So, but for me, it was a screener. I chatted with somebody on a video chat, and then they asked me questions, I asked them questions, and then we went as pair programming. It was pair extension, and it was fixing some code and making some tests pass. And the thing that I really appreciated about that interview was that it was something that she had fixed earlier, like later, like the prior week. So, and she didn't tell me that until after the interview was over, which I really appreciated. So, so then after that, I got to fly into to GitHub. So I flew from New York to San Francisco, and I met a few people. I think the person who interviewed me for the technical interview, and I met 3 other women on the team, and I also got a tour of GitHub, and then after that, a few days later, after I came back to New York, I got an email.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And what about you, Stanley? What was the interview process for you like?
For me, it started out with a take-home test.
Interesting.
Yeah, actually, and I really actually very much like that interview style. Yeah, so it was just a take-home test to be completed on GitHub.com. So I sat there, I checked in code, and when I was ready, I made a pull request and described as much as I can about it, and sent it in that way. So after that portion, there was a follow-up conversation about my solution. And then there was one final day where it was just a good long day of meetings, where it was, I think I had spoken with Jasmine and a few other team members where we went over my project in group. A few more different calls. I had one with Phil Hack. I had a call with kind of like a diversity and an inclusion call. And yeah, it was a day of phone calls. And then the next day I had gotten an email, and here I am.
Nice. So both of you, it sounds like both of you went through, multiple rounds of interviews. Did you prepare for that in any type of special way? Was there, you knew that you were going to have these interviews like, a few days before. Did you say, hey, I need to brush up on this before I go into this interview? Or was there any of that going on? We'll start with you, Stanley.
Okay, sure. Well, it was different only because, usually I would, depending on who the interview is for, right? It taken interviews at larger names, and yeah, I would definitely tear my hair out for about a week ahead of time, just trying to cram anything I could find into my head. But since this interview style is take home, the whole pressure is now different, right? It's now, instead of being, it's almost like a home court advantage in a weird way. As opposed to going to an interview where you're suited up, you are not, you're just never feeling quite well for that scenario, You walk into some building and standing in front of a room, in front of a whiteboard with whiteboard marker and eraser in your hand, as opposed to just being given a puzzle and saying, being told to use your resources and do the best you can, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So it's definitely a lot easier of an interview style. It really allows you to just show and prove.
Gotcha. And speaking on that, do you feel that? Of course, it's an easier process, but do you think that process is a more fair process as opposed to coming in and getting hit with questions and being told to whiteboard and things like that? Do you think this is a more fair way of assessing a person's technical skills?
Well, we try to do it in a way where we don't know whose code we're reviewing. Something about like our current interviews is that we don't. We try to remove all little pieces of bias that you could have from the interview process, right?
Very nice.
So I do think it's something that you work towards. You're never really always there, but I think it removes a lot of that, and I think it a good step towards making it more fair.
Excellent, excellent. And Jasmine, what about you? Like, what did you do anything to prepare for your interviews?
Yeah, so I I knew what the kind of like the team I would be joining. So I kind of brushed up on a few things like that. I kind of like wrote down a few things I knew that I should probably brush up on. But for me, I'm not a fan of doing a lot of intensive studying. I did that in school and I can't do that again. Usually when I'm going between jobs, and I'm interviewing, I don't leave my job before I, join a new one. So I still have a full-time job while I'm interviewing. So for me, I really appreciated that the stuff like the interview, and you usually never know what they're going to interview or ask you, but at the same time, so I really appreciated that my interview was something relevant to what I would be working on if I joined. And so yeah, so I did I kind of like hit some like hot points on things like that I need to brush up on, and I was like, all right, this is it for me, and kind of like and then another thing I did was like I did like a lot of breathing exercises, because when you interview, your nerves will get worked up and you get nervous. So I remember, I will never forget. So on my technical interview was on a computer, we were pairing over video chat. And I was sitting in front of the computer, and I was just like breathing in and out, waiting, counting down the time that I had to sign into this video chat.
No, that's great information to put out there, because I had a discussion with a friend of mine. Her name is Ayuri Selassie. She's an engineer at Salesforce, and she also runs an organization called Life Model Canvas, and she does a lot of other stuff in tech. She's a advocate for diversity in tech, women in tech. But she was talking to me recently about the side of tech that a lot of people don't address when it comes to just being a person in tech, right? From a health standpoint, right? And so she was telling me about not only is her organization and one of the organizations she's involved with going to teach young people and people coming up about some of those soft skills and some of those technical skills, but also the skills that you don't get told about. So, as a engineer, a person at computers, you work all day. You're sitting at your desk all day. You might not, get as much exercise and things like that. So she was talking about the health aspect of it all, and I think that really, kind of ties into what you're saying as far as just getting your breathing together, getting mentally, or not mentally, but getting physically prepared for these interviews going in, because most people won't think about that. They'll think about, just being on your P's and Q's when it comes to, your skill set and the knowledge and things like that. And then they can, even though that they seem super prepared from the technical side, they end up stumbling because they can't calm themselves down. And so I think that's a good point that you made. Excellent. So tell us about, about your organization, about GitHub a little bit. When someone is hiring for your position, I know, Jasmine, you were telling us that you sit in on interviews and you actually give interviews now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've done it a few times.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about kind of what GitHub looks for in a candidate. Like what are the skills, experiences do they consider kind of most valuable?
So I mean, so it all differs from team to team, because our team, we write mostly C#, but GitHub is essentially mostly Ruby. So a lot of, so it just all comes down to like what technologies you're working with, and then it goes into how do you work well with others. How's your intellectual humility? Like, if someone says this seems wrong, this line of code seems wrong, how defensive are you about it? And it's really important because GitHub is 60% remote. So a lot of it is typing and chatting with people and video chatting. So no one's, sometimes it's very hard to read somebody's body language and see how they're reacting. And it's a really, so that's that. So and I guess along those lines is also communication. How do you communicate?
Right.
How are you, how's your, not essentially the writing, but how are you kind of chatting with the team in a way that they can understand? Because since GitHub is remote, we have people all over the world. So the way that people communicate might be different, from country to country. So there's that, and then there's also since also along the lines of being remote, are you self-starter? The time of day that you might start may not matter depending on what team you are. But when you do get your day started, are you holding yourself accountable for the things that you want to get done? Do you have a list of things that you want to get done? And what have you done? Can you kind of measure the things that you've done in a way that makes it understand, so that when it comes for a review time, you can say I did X, Y, and Z. So and specifically in our team, and then also in kind of our engineer part of the engineer ecosystem, we don't really, no one's like really looking over your shoulder. No one's really asking you, poking you, saying what did you do? Did you do this? Did you do that? Everyone, it's a very lax environment. So so there's a level of trust. So another question that as an interviewer, you ask, can we trust this person? Can they collaborate well? Can they communicate well? And can we trust them?
Excellent. And Stanley, I want to ask you this next question. How should someone go about, you're interviewing for a candidate and you're looking for a specific skill set, right? How should someone go about developing these skills before they even get to that interview point? Like, is there like specific coursework or licenses or certifications, anything like that you all look for when you look at a candidate?
Well, how to develop those skills? You get them from a lot of places. I mean, I do read a lot. I try to follow up on a good amount of tech blogs. In particular, I feel like there was one Pluralsight interviewing course that I watched that I feel like that was really helpful and really clutch to watch before I interviewed. And I think that's also a really good tip, is chances are you probably know the tech as well as you're going to test for. And you should probably focus more on soft skills when you're interviewing, because those are the things that are actually probably going to grease the wheels more, right? But as far as other skills that we tend to look for, I think Jasmine covered a lot of them. It's a lot of communication. That's really what a lot of tech is. On our team alone, she's in Brooklyn, I'm in Long Island, but we have one person in Denmark, one person in Newcastle, and one person in Italy. So time zones, really personal scheduling becomes really important. The fact that we're remote is also a challenge for some people. You know, we'll stir crazy if you're by yourself in a room all day, just looking at a computer screen. But I think what really helps is that the people that we really are working with do genuinely want to be there. So putting up the work in that type of scenario isn't that much of a challenge in that sense.
I think that's really interesting. As far as the time zone thing. So like, are there any specific questions that you might ask that will show that a person is kind of okay with working by themselves for like extended periods of time? Is there any way that like like what specific questions would you ask? Do you come out and say it, hey, are you okay with working by yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty direct question. There really is. There really isn't any way to beat around it. Not everybody has the type of job that'll let them work from home every day of the week, but especially in tech, usually you can get a few days occasionally, or at least a semi-regular basis, right? And
right.
Although the reasons why in those scenarios is because you usually have something to take care of. You usually have an errand, a UPS package, something that you need to do. So you're already kind of distracted. Yeah, it's I don't have a good answer for it, to be honest. It's not something that's directly testable.
Right.
What?
So a direct question would probably be the best way of. And have you ever had any scenarios where a person is just like, yeah, I don't like working by myself. I'd rather be around people.
I mean, I know plenty of friends that couldn't do it. I think having a space at home where you can actually like set up, plot, and actually focus. You know what I mean? Not the couch across from the TV is a really big thing. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people that can't do it, and
right.
I can empathize on the other side of it. But it's nice not being stuck in the subway.
Right. The commute is always the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because I started working at a position at an educational software company about a little bit over a year ago. And my commute at the time was maybe about 25 minutes, which to big city people, that's nothing. But to, smaller to mid-sized cities like Cincinnati, that's like 25 minutes. Well, wow, I don't want to travel that long. But anyhow, I started out going into the office like every single day. And, as I started getting a little bit more comfortable, I started, a couple of days here at home. And now it's like 90%, 90 to 95% of my time. But I've moved since then, and now I stay like 35 to 40 minutes away. So the commute, even when I do have to go into the office, I don't look forward to it. But that commute alone just makes it a lot easier to, say, hey, I'm working from home again today. So yeah, it's. You have to be ready. You have to be prepared to work from home. With me, I hadn't worked from home ever before this job. And so I was used to the social interaction and things like that you'll find in a common office space. And I've got kids too. So that's something to contend with as well. But I've learned to like waking up 10 minutes before I have to actually start, and brush the teeth and just run downstairs and start working. And then, I found myself finding being able to focus and concentrate a little bit more and get a lot more stuff done. So yeah, I can definitely empathize with that. So Jasmine, I want to talk to you a little bit about, resumes, right? Some people say they don't matter. Some people say they still do matter. Since, you've got LinkedIn out there now and people say, that's your resume. How important is a resume at GitHub? And if it's important, like kind of what are some of the things that some of the do's and don'ts of a resume?
Okay. So for resumes, yeah, they are important at the very beginning of the interview process because the recruiter needs to know who they're bringing in to for these interviews. So you kind of have to they see your skills and they're like, okay, this is the position this person applied for, and this resume looks relevant to this position. Let's move them on to the hiring manager and get the process going. So, but then the further and further you get into the interview process, the less it matters, because your interviewers are learning more and more and more and more about you. So that's when I would say the resume isn't relevant anymore, because you got the resume to show to basically to state that your skills, and then the interview is for when you prove those skills.
Right. So is there anything in regards to the resume that you all specifically look for, or is it just a matching of skills? Is there, like, for instance, some resumes are formatted a certain way. Some resumes may have certain keywords in them that you all look for. Do you just say, hey, or even the school that they went to, or is it just what languages do you say what type of projects did you say that you worked on, and we're going to base that that initial phone call off that and bring you in?
Yeah, so definitely there are definitely keywords that recruiting knows to kind of look out for. And so then when that person has been moved on to kind of be interviewed, then it comes down to like what the details of what they did. So if they put like a project on there that they've done, I personally, yes, I would look at it if I were to be interviewing that person, and I would probably look at their website and see what they've worked on, or any interesting information about them. Because when I interview people, I like to like kind of have a conversation about them, and I like to like talk about them, and because at the end of the day, it's about them, the person that you're interviewing. It's not about it's not about me. It's about them. And I want to see it's so again, I guess again it goes back to like the resume is important of like what you stated, and so for me, I use a resume as a point to have like a conversation, and also it's like a really great way to like kind of like break the ice, and kind of like a way for them to like be less nervous when they're talking about something that they're passionate about. So and I guess to answer your specific question about if there's anything specific that recruiters look for, it comes to first it's the tech, and then it's the projects. Or any relevant work experience. So we don't look at schools really. We don't care how you learn, but what we care is that and you'll see this on every engineering position at GitHub or application at GitHub. We ask that you have worked at least 1 year in a software development environment. Like you've been a software engineer, like you've been titled as a software engineer for at least 1 year. And that's probably our only requirement. And then also the skills, like, whatever language.
Gotcha. So I'll address this to Stanley. So how important is a person's web presence? How important is it that they actually use GitHub, or have maybe their own blog site where they blog about some things that they have been learning? Do you all look at those things, and how much emphasis do you actually put on those things?
I think those things kind of bear more importance than your resume, right? I mean, especially if you're doing stuff on GitHub and you are contributing to open source projects, or you are finding something interesting to work on. If you're honestly doing it from a point of, I'm interested in this, there's really no better sales material, right? And so, yeah, I do think using sites like GitHub and contributing to open source in different ways are very good ways of showing yourself off, as well as LinkedIn. I mean, I feel like I've never cultivated my LinkedIn profile as well as some people. And then I've seen some LinkedIn profiles that made me envious, like, oh, like why haven't I been using rewriting my resume every 3 years? You know what I mean? Like, it's like a no-brainer after the fact. But and writing resumes is a tricky thing, and LinkedIn just really feels like another resume to me. So I never really got, I never felt like I had a good LinkedIn presence. But I would definitely try to have a better presence on sites like Stack Overflow. I have a decent presence on GitHub as well.
Right.
Yeah, those are little things that can show you can definitely process, answer, deal with people.
Excellent, excellent. And speaking of dealing with people, let's talk a little bit about culture. What role does culture play in determining whether or not you accept the position? You all have both have been at different companies throughout your journey in tech. So how much did culture play in determining your whether or not you accept the position? And then if you could speak to what's the culture like there at do they put an emphasis on making sure that cultures are diverse, or that culture is this way or that way? Tell us a little bit about that, Stanley, and then I'll.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let's see. I'm sorry. My head was stuck on the culture part, and before that, you were going a few different things. All right. So one thing that was important in a work culture for me when I was looking for a new position was that I felt like there were people that I could honestly learn from. I feel like I was in too many positions for far too long where there weren't many people to mentor from, either because they really weren't there, or disinterested, or the skill set wasn't there to really mentor people. And I think that was a large part of it. I think I had read a little bit about the team and the people that were on the team that I was applying for. And that was what sold me mostly, was seeing the work that some of these people have done in their past, and wanting to be a part of that, or whatever they did next. So that was the biggest thing that I was looking for.
How were you able to gauge that from, let's say, just an interview standpoint? Like, were you able to gauge? I know you talked about being able to learn from others, but kind of what were there particular questions that you would ask that would lead to whether or not that culture was conducive to you learning?
Sure. So something that I had done that really helped, I think, during interviewing was researching the people that were interviewing me. I found out who I was going to be interviewing with, and I spent a good amount of time finding projects they had worked on, finding their own LinkedIn pages, finding their resumes, and just seeing what they had been up to. And I guess maybe it was a bit of a leap of faith after that, right? I think I was impressed by the job history and the tech skills that I felt were just almost bleeding on a resume. And I was like, all right, well, I think that is what I'm just gonna follow, because I don't think I had seen that or felt that about people that I had worked with before in the past. So that was really the biggest sale point for me. It was finding out technically what these people, or at least would sell themselves as. Yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, conversations, of course, obviously help. I mean, talking to people, and you can get a gauge of personality to a certain extent.
Right.
But for me, it was mostly seeing what they had done previously, and that was really what sold it for me. As far as other culture things go, yeah, GitHub works really hard to make a diverse culture in a lot of different ways. Looking for everything from trying to find different ways or different places to find employees to source from, and yeah, I'm kind of drawing a blank at others right now.
Excellent, excellent. What about you? And yeah, because and Elizabeth is Elizabeth Barron is who put this whole thing together, got us in contact with each other. So it seems like, you know, that GitHub is at least trying to do their part when it comes to, you know, diversity in tech and culture and things like that. So kudos to GitHub. Jasmine, tell us a little bit about, you know, kind of your experience with culture in the industry throughout the years, and tell us a little bit about, you know, kind of some of the things that you look for when assessing culture at a position.
So for me, I got a, you know, actually like really interesting hint to like GitHub's culture when the person who I met at the conference had reached out to me. So because Nicole was, you know, Nicole Sanchez was tweeting these pictures and putting captions on them. So like the fact that she was just like happy and proud to see, you know, see that kind of gave me one hint. And then the second thing, and I will never forget this. This is when during my on-site interview at GitHub, somebody asked me, they said, I want you to be completely aware that at this moment, we don't have many Blacks in engineering at GitHub. And I want you to be aware of that you're going to be, you might be alone for a bit, but I want you to know that we're working on it and it's getting better. And like, she looked me in the eye when she said that. And she was just like, I just want to be real with you. And I was just like, thank you so much for telling me that. And thank you so much for, you know, saying that to me. And that's when I knew that like, this is a place where I could trust with being myself and them accepting me for who I am. So, and then in terms of culture, when I joined GitHub, we have a internal group called the Black Cats, and it's a group for those who identify as African American or Black at GitHub, and it's we do some social impact work. We volunteer. We also just like chat and kick back and kick it, and you know it's like we're basically in like a secluded like Slack private Slack channel, and okay. So you know we can like be real with each other and just you know be honest with each other and chat in a safe space. Right. And then and GitHub really encourages you to, you know, find your people and then find your place. So it's not, you know, obviously, yeah, you're there to work, but but you also want to like, you know, just connect with your teammates because, you know, everyone's all over the world. You know, it's 60%. You know, GitHub 60% remote. So you know, you want to connect with people. You want to chat with people like you. So, you know, we even have rooms for technical women, you know, who are interested in asking questions, but not sure how to phrase it. And, you know, just they want a safe space to like ask and feel like they're not being judged. So, right. So GitHub is like really good about just like letting people find places to be themselves and also, you know, letting you connect with others and in a meaningful way. So I really appreciate that about GitHub, and like they do really a really good job at like, you know, just like supporting remote people. So so they have like all kinds of like ways for you to like to communicate. So like, you know, we have all hands, and we have all hands, and those all hands are recorded so that, you know, if it's not in your time zone when it's live, you can look at it later. And we have like emails, you know, like, you know, weekly emails of like what happened that day or what happened that week. So yeah.
Excellent. And what's the name of the group there?
The Black Cats.
Black the Cats. Okay.
Oh, by the way, speaking of which, so at the end of February, we got to see and kind of celebrated the first Black Cat or Black Octocat, and he was modeled after Bruce Ben Banneker, and he is he's I think he's called the Bannecat. And if you go on like if you just Google like GitHub Octadex, you'll see him at the very top. It's pretty cool.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. I'd be really interested in connecting with you about the group and maybe doing some like a Q&A or something with a panel of you all. With you all, if that's something you might be interested. I think just having a representation at the company and allowing, so we do meetups across the nation, and we just started a meetup here in Cincinnati. And I think what would be really cool would be to do kind of a remote Q&A with people from the group. If I think that would be pretty cool.
Sure,
Yeah.
I'd be interested.
Yeah, we love to like chat with other folks and folks in like the tech space. It's just like a great way to like just chat and just talk and
excellent
compare.
Yeah, we'll make that happen. A couple more questions before we get out of here. And I'll address this to both of you, starting with you, Jasmine. What a question or some questions that you can think of that potential employees should always ask when going into an interview process?
They should ask that person that the interviewer that what their normal day looks like, what they do every day, to kind of gauge like what like the workload will look like.
Right.
They should also ask what would their maybe their 30 or 60 day their first 30 or 60 days at GitHub look like. How do they know that that period of time has been successful? And they should also ask I'm not sure, but I think those two are like very like good questions to like get to understand, what the workload will be like, and what would be expected of you if you were to join.
Excellent. And what about you, Stanley?
I think how many, or does the company offer learning and development opportunities, mentoring opportunities? What are paths to advancement within the company? It's a really big one.
Right.
What are the things that you're going to ask that are really important? I think the learning and development one is really also important for me. The learning, development, and mentoring one. I think it shows a company that's willing to invest in their own employees more than bringing in fresh, which is some places do that instead. So yeah, those are really important things for me, I think.
Yeah, I think the one you mentioned about advancement to me stuck out the most, simply because when people are so excited, just getting in the door, they tend to not kind of look ahead. And I think that's a really good way to, right out the bat, you come in and let employers know that, hey, you're not just going to settle for the status quo of just getting in the door, and that you're looking to advance within the company. And that shows initiative on your part. So I think that's a really good one to point out. But not least, we'll start with you, Stanley. What are some do's and don'ts that people should be aware of, things that you've seen either before or after an employee has been hired? So like, what are some things that, coming in the door you shouldn't do? And what are some things that, maybe going out the door, you say, hey, you shouldn't do that, or, things that you should do?
Sure. Things that you should do. I mean, one big one for me is the one that I mentioned before, researching the people that you're interviewing with. They should be doing that on you. Chances are they may not. But if you do your research on them, the conversation should be about you, right? But you all know that the best way to make someone like you is to actually make them talk about them, or to talk about their things. So if you can find some way to bring out what you've researched about them and not come off as creepy, somehow managed to navigate that. I think that's a really big help. Yeah, it just gives you a good point to talk about, and the fact that you're talking about something that is in their minds, something about them, is going to put you in there a little bit more than you'd imagine. That was really my biggest thing that I think I did recently that helped. Just gave you a good chunk of preparedness.
Right.
You kind of know what this person's about more, so you, I don't know, you kind of feel the conversations you could have a little bit more in your head.
Excellent, excellent. And what about you, Jasmine?
Yeah, I agree with, definitely doing your research, and also just making sure that when you get that calendar invite for an interview, make sure that you schedule your time around that, and don't be afraid to say this time doesn't work for me. Don't have a meeting in your car. Don't, just like be comfortable, be somewhere where you feel like you be able to do your best. So yeah, I think there's that, and I would say yeah, just
don't be afraid to say what you don't know.
Yeah, right, exactly. Don't put things like, on your right. So this comes to your resume, like, but don't put things in a resume that you don't know. And like, because if it comes to a point where it's possible that you might be questioned about that. So you don't want that to end up get ruining your chances of making it to the final round and actually getting hired.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I want to thank both of you for your time and for your answers and for your information. Yeah, so before we get out of here, how can people get in contact with you, follow you on Twitter or on GitHub or anything like that? We'll start with you, Jasmine.
I am known as Paladik on the internet, on Twitter, on GitHub. So
can you spell that?
PALADIQUE.
Okay. What about you, Stanley?
Me on Twitter, I am Stan_programmer. And I have my full name on GitHub as my username, so it's Stanley Goldman.
Excellent. Well, thanks to both of you once again for joining us tonight. I really appreciated your time and the information. And we will definitely connect again. I definitely want to get you all in front of our meetup group here in Cincinnati to do a Q&A possibly. So again, thanks a lot and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.